Hi kids, it's Brody from Brody's Garage. This is episode 20. This will be a rather brief episode, but I did get a few things done here in the garage and I'm proud of myself, so let me show you what happened. Alright, so I picked up a little brake hone kit here and went inside of this harmonic balancer hub. Of course, the trick is that there's a keyway groove right there. So you gotta kind of get the thing started and get it going right away so that it kind of skips over the groove. Anyway, I think I managed to give it a cleaning up. Let's see if it goes on any easier. Well, as I thought might happen, I sheared off one of the stones of my hone, so I decided to just take a strip of 320 sandpaper and wrap it in there and use the hone to press that against it. Let's see if this works. Is he working? Well, after all of that nonsense, I've got my harmonic balancer hub back on. It is torqued to spec to 235 foot-pounds. I tightened up my oil pan and timing cover bolts. And now I'm going to grab some Loctite and put the outer ring back on the hub. And this part is done. Then I can put the water pump back on, accessories, and basically go back to where I was a few days ago. Exciting. All right, well, I got the balancer back on. I got the crankshaft pulley on next. Then I put the water pump assembly on, which I already had the water pump installed inside the housing. The next step after that is to get the alternator in place before you put the power steering pump on, because you can't get to, which bolt is it? This bolt down here for the alternator can't get to with the power steering pulley on. So alternator first. And then the power steering pump is on, which required me installing the pulley onto the shaft with a special tool right there. Got that in there all the way. Everything is torqued down to spec and so far seems to be lining up with each other. We get pretty good alignment going on with all the pulley grooves. And right now I'm working on the AC compressor and I had to pull the valve cover back off on this side to get that bolt in. I don't know why they had it come in from the back side, but that's the way they did it. So the valve cover had to come back off. Tighten these down, put the valve cover back on. I'll get the idler tensioner pulley assembly here, which is, where'd you go? Where's my idler? Oh, it's right there. That guy will go on next. Then the belt can go on, and then basically the front end of the engine is done. Now I was going to try to put the headers down and forward, which they actually clear on this side, kind of just barely. On this side, they do not clear. Even if I would have taken the reservoir off and used a remote reservoir, the pulley would have hit. So that scratched that idea. So the headers will come up and forward. So sometimes it's nice to just rule something out. That was a big question mark until now. So let's proceed. Now, one thing about these Motion Raceworks valve covers, as nice as they are, you cannot torque these center bolts down to the factory spec. I forget if it was 18 foot-pounds or 20 foot-pounds, whatever it was. I noticed right away before I even reached that these were starting to dimple. So I contacted Motion and I said, hey, what's up? And they said, no, just snug them down. Don't torque them down that much. So I'm glad that I asked. Anyway, they said, yeah, if you torque them down too much, they'll crack. So if you're going to use these, just snug them down evenly and you should be good. Hopefully, we'll find out. Well, for the next adventure, I am installing my fuel injectors and my Holley fuel rails, which are quite a nuisance, I gotta say. First of all, they only fit with the direction so that the logo is facing up. I would have thought that they would have fit this way. Maybe that's just personal preference, but they only fit in that direction. That being said, there's two different options, a long and a short bracket that mounts to this point on the intake, and then the fuel rail is supposed to mount inside those two flanges right there. Well, if you take a look here at one of these rails, you'll see that a new unused bracket does not actually fit over there, not without doing some manipulation. It's just too tight of a fit. So what I had to do is take them over here to the vise, and I put them in there, and then I found something to wedge in between there. In this case, it's a little oil galley plug or a freeze plug. with a little washer in between it, and I screwed the mounting bolt down, which pushes against this and spreads the bracket out. And I've already done this one, but I'll show you just for example. Got to take this thing and tighten it up, and you'll see the bracket is starting to spread itself wider. Insert sexual innuendo right there. Anyway, that being said, once I take this thing back out, it should now fit. Let's get our fuel rail and let's see. Did it open it up just enough? Why, by golly, it sure did. Look at that. So you people at Holley, what's going on with you guys? Brand new rails, brand new brackets that you sent me out of the box, and they don't fit over your rails until I do that. So hopefully this helps somebody else out there in the world. All right, well, even after that spreading over there, they still closed themselves tighter. As soon as I bolted the bracket down to the intake manifold, it's like it pulled it tighter. So what I just did is I snugged them down, and I took this and just kind of wedged it down in between there and gave it a little bend, a little pry. And I'd open them up, rails dropped in. So maybe I didn't need to do that on the bench after all, but anyway, that's what I'm learning as I go. And I got my bolts in, so the rails are secure, at least on this side I got them in. I haven't decided yet until I get the car, until the engine in the car, whether the injector harness is going to go on this outside like this, or if I'm going to turn them, because the injectors can rotate. Maybe I'll put them up there on the inside so that it kind of hides the wiring better. I guess we'll see about that later, but for right now, let's get the other side in, and this is done. All right, second side's going a little bit easier. I also decided to take the injectors out and put them into the rail end first, and then put the whole assembly down together, which seems to be a little bit smoother. Everything's going in now, and let's just pop it on down. Everything seems to be lined up, and let's just give it a little snugging up. There we go. Injectors are in. And by the way, I did coat the O-rings with a little bit of motor oil, which was what I researched and found out that was the general consensus, was a little bit of light oil on the O-rings and the little sockets where the injectors go into, just a little bit. So there you go. Snug these down and these are done. All right, fuel rails are installed on the intake, both sides. And the intake's just sitting on here right now. It's not bolted down. It's going to come off when I put the motor plate on to install it in the car. And I decided to throw the throttle body on right now too. So I figured I'd do everything that's intake related. I'll get the throttle bracket, this on there, the throttle position sensor. I'm not sure if I got an idle air control motor. I have to look and see if it's among all those boxes there. If not, I guess I need one of those. But you can kind of get the sense of what's going to happen here. I've got all my accessories in place now, belts aligned, and you know, once it's sitting in the car, those headers are going to come forward like this and probably sit somewhere in there, and I'll just have to see, am I going to have to make a bend to get to the turbo, or will the turbo fit up here? It's all going to come down to, you know, the available real estate with the radiator, fans, and then the accessory drive. There's not going to be a lot of room up here. And so I'm probably going to have to cut into my inner fender panel a little bit to get the turbo mounted over here. Ideally, I would like to keep the plumbing as short as possible to minimize any sort of turbo lag. I'd like this thing to basically enter the turbine housing just as quickly as possible and start making boost. I see a lot of guys running pipes all over the place. They're running them all the way to the back of the trunk. They're running pickup trucks with them in the back of the bed of the pickup. I don't quite get that logic. For me, especially using a air-to-water intercooler, I don't need all the extra plumbing of having to go from here into a turbo and then the turbocharger out into an intercooler up front and then back into the intake. This is just pretty much a straight shot. So as few bends as possible as far as I'm concerned. We're going to get it into the turbo for the hot side, and then the cold side is just going to come right out and go up here into a Y-pipe merge. This is a 95 millimeter throttle body, which is actually one of the smaller sizes Holley makes. But if you can see, it's about, I don't know, 3.5 to 4 inches in diameter. It's plenty big. especially considering all that incoming charge is going to be under pressure. So I'm not worried about getting air into there so much. And if anything, I wanted to keep as much drivability and throttle response possible. So in my mind, thinking that keeping all this kind of on the small side, the exhaust is actually not all that bulky either. These are 1 3/4" primaries. They had 1 7/8", but I feel like 1 3/4 is enough. And it is going to make a bend here if it has to, and then I will have to reduce down to 2.5 inch from 3 inch because the turbocharger inlet, which, by the way, those are my turbos there. You want to take a look at one? All right, let me pause this. This is one of 2 precision turbochargers that I'll be using on this bad boy here. It's going to be twin turbos, so one on that side, one on this side, and they are mirror image. And I've talked about it before, but basically what that means is that the spiral direction, the clock facing of this, is symmetrical left to right. A lot of times you buy 2 turbochargers and they're spun the same direction. So if you mount one on this side, then you mount one on that side, they're both kind of spun, one's gonna be spun the opposite direction. So you gotta like turn it, and then the inlet and outlet are gonna be upside down from each other. And every time I see it, it hurts my brain. So I opted for the mirror image turbos because I want the symmetry, you know? So anyhow, this is our turbo. It's not huge. It's not one of the giant bad boys that you see in drag racing. It's really pretty mild. I think it's a T3 housing. It's a 6266, which I believe means it's a 62 millimeter something. I don't know what. Anyway, this is our hot side. So that's a 2.5 inch inlet. So we have to reduce from 3 inch to 2.5 inch. And we'll do that as streamlined and slick as we can. Then from there, and again, I'm just kind of talking to myself or anybody out there who might be just learning about these things like I am, our exhaust gas, okay, our exhaust gas goes into there. So we have a turbine side and a compressor side. The turbine is the hot side. Exhaust gas comes racing in there and spools this thing up, and then it dumps out the bypass out the downpipe, which we'll talk about in a second. On the opposite side of that same shaft spinning, we have the compressor side, which takes cold air, sucks it in through here, and then compresses it and spins it out of here. From there, it's basically going to make its way into the throttle body and into the intake manifold. And I'm going to attempt to do that as short and streamlined as possible. What I find odd is I just started my venture into the turbo world. This is my first pair of turbos, my first turbo engine build. It kind of baffles me as I see a lot of guys running these things with nothing on them, just no screen, no filter, nothing. They're wide out in the open. A lot of times they're sticking out of the hood or they're down front in an opening in the grill. And for me, just the idea of ramming dirt and dust into your turbo and into your engine at a very, very high RPM. I don't know what these things spin, but I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20,000 RPM. This thing is going very fast. And the idea of a smallest particle of dirt getting whipped into there and just whipped around and then blown, force-fed into your engine does not sound like a good idea. So I decided to get a couple of K&N filters and edit. That is my little K&N air filter right there. And so that just fits right over the inlet side there, and it's got a clamp on it there. And I just thought, you know, even if that chokes off some of the airflow, that is a far better option than having dirt rammed into my engine. I don't know, maybe some of you turbo experts out there will tell me, am I gonna lose 50 horsepower with this setup or not? I don't know. The guys at Motion Raceworks, which I bought a lot of their stuff, I got their valve covers on there, I've got some of their fuel products, their intake valley cover, a few other things. They're the ones that recommended these turbos. I said, look, I'm looking to make power with this thing. It's gonna live on the street. It's gonna be it's gonna be driven daily or a lot. I wanna be able to cruise this thing, but also I want the power to go over 1,000 horsepower. And they said those things will make every bit of 1,200 horsepower. So I don't feel like I'm under turboed. If this thing will produce 15 pounds of boost, I think I'm at the 1,000 horsepower mark. So that's where I'm sitting right now. And of course, we won't really get into the plumbing of the turbocharger until we get the engine in the car. But there it is. It looks like a big robot. You know, it just wouldn't be right if something just bolted right on and fit. These are the Motion Performance coil brackets. And these are the MSD coils. And these are my Flowtech headers. And as you can see, this first coil right here is aiming right at that primary. And I've already got it on the highest mounting point to move it as far away as possible. So I'm going to drill another hole right there so I can move the entire thing even further away. Let's see how that works. All right, well, moving those holes definitely moved the coils away and improved my distance from the header to the spark plug boot. However, I guess these spark plug wires that I order must be longer than stock or longer than necessary, because they're just about 3 inches too long. When you plug it in down there, there's still quite a bit of slack. I'm going to go ahead and throw in a couple plugs just to double check that. These are NGKs. They're the TR6 series. And I went ahead and I gapped mine at 28 thousandths. I read a lot of different answers on forums and such. Seemed like the range was anywhere from 20 to 28, and it seemed like the more boost that you run, the tighter the gap's supposed to be. Well, at least initially, I'm not going to be pushing this thing to its limit, so I'm more concerned about drivability and low boost, so I'm going to go with 28. Also, I just have a general rule. Anything that goes into aluminum is going to get a little light coat of anti-seize, so I put some anti-seize on these threads, and those are aluminum heads, so that's what I did. All right, well, these plug wires are not going to work. They're too long, and I need a angled boot here. These come out pretty much straight. They've got a very slight angle, but it's not near enough. I need something that can come off that plug and then bend up. We're talking, I don't know, a 45-degree angle maybe even a 90. And these are just too darn long. As you can see, they need to be like down to here, and they're way up here. So, I don't know, maybe 3 inches long. And yeah, well, I'll send these back, get some different plug wires. Can't find out until you try. Well, I think I'm gonna call it a night. I got my spark plugs in, gapped and in. I got my starter motor on, and it does not require any shims. I pulled the pinion gear out, and it's got ample clearance between the teeth there. I did have to loosen up these two bolts here and clock the starter. This one here allows the body to rotate from its mounting pad here. So I had to pull it away from the block just slightly and retorque those down with some Loctite. But the starter is on. The flex plate is waiting to be torqued on. Once I get this thing off the stand and before I made it to the transmission, I'm gonna torque all these. One thing that struck me as odd is I gotta see if there's a pin that goes in there to clock this with the crankshaft, because I would have thought so. There's a hole there and there's a hole in the crank. So note to self, make sure that there's a pin that goes in there, or make sure that there isn't one, I guess. I started working on my steam vent kit. It's kind of a do-it-yourself kit from Motion Raceworks. Apparently their other kit does not clear underneath this Lo-Ram intake, so you got to use flexible hose. So I've got to cut and crimp my hoses to these fittings, but the fittings are all in place. And then there's a little 4-way block that goes underneath the intake, and I'll probably just let it float in there, or maybe I'll put a little soft tape or something on top of the valley pan, because all it is just steam. Intake air temperature sensor. I think this is a good location for that. I see a lot of guys run them on the inlet side before the throttle body, but I'm gonna do some checking and see if that's a good enough place to put that. Anybody out there know better? Chime in. I sure like it back here out of the way. Let's see. Got my coil brackets on, as we talked about. I drilled the holes here to move them up further away from the header. So new holes right there and there. And I got to get some new plug wires that will angle away and also angle at a 90 down here from the plug boot, and a little bit shorter than the ones that I have. I've got to install my fuel pressure regulator and a crossover line here. Kind of to my surprise, the regulator goes after the fuel line. I'm going to run my pressure lines from the tank, or from the pumps in the tank, through the filter, and then they're going to come up here and they're going to do a Y split into each fuel rail, and then the fuel will continue past the injectors over here to a regulator, which has a bypass valve in it. So at a designated fuel pressure, it'll release that extra pressure and return it to the tank. This is my air-to-water intercooler, and that'll have to be plumbed once it's inside the car to the ice tank, which is in the back of the trunk there. The air conditioner, where did I put that little fitting? This thing here is probably not going to work. This is what came with the Holley Serpentine Drive accessory kit. And as you can see, by the time you get that mounted in there, it's sticking out just a little bit too close to the header. So I'm going to see if they make one of these with a block that comes out in 90s up or 90s down. So I can either take my lines and run them over here and down, or up and over the headers, because there's really not enough space to go down between there. So it's either going to have to come off to the side or up and over. So I'll look into that. This guy here is just a universal thing I found on, I think it was on Amazon actually. Surprisingly, I couldn't find a lot of these Y elbows, but this one matches the right specs. It's a 3-inch inlet and a 4-inch outlet into the throttle body. I haven't really cranked all this down. I'm just not 100% sure about this as a method because I have a funny feeling it's going to work its way out or work its way loose. I may end up sucking it up and purchasing the Motion Raceworks Icon adapter or their Icon throttle body. I'm not sure, but they make like a billet aluminum one that Y's right here, and it's a solid connection with a V-band as opposed to a hose and a clamp. This also may be sticking out too far. I won't know until I get it in the car how much clearance I'm going to have between the radiator and all this, so this may have to change. That said, it's a pretty fine looking piece of machinery there. Better than anything I've ever had in the past. I'm pretty stoked about it, and I'm excited to hear it run. And so I think I'm going to call it a night. Feeling pretty good about the way things have progressed. And I should be getting my transmission sometime in this coming week. I really hope so. And when that happens, we will put the engine next to the transmission via some bolts. I've still got to go down and get an engine hoist. I don't own an engine hoist yet. And I'm probably just going to go down to Harbor Freight and get one of theirs. To get the kind that folds up, you know, so I can kind of tuck it away when I'm done. And I'm going to get the load leveling thing so I can adjust the angle of the pitch on it when it's going in. And get the engine and transmission in the car. And once that's in, I think really that just sort of sets a lot of things into motion. It'll give me a really good idea of what I can do for my turbo plumbing and placement. You know, I can start thinking about my downpipes and exhaust, fuel lines and things like that. And once the mechanical stuff is to a point where I feel like I'm no longer cutting and welding on the car, it's all coming back out. The suspension will come off, get powder coated, the car will get put back on a rotisserie, and I may be taking it to either my buddy Al's place up in Pahrump, or maybe Mitch Lanzini, if you're still out there, if you're still wanting to help out, maybe we'll truck this thing down to California. I don't know yet, but in any case, we're making progress. And are you guys getting dizzy? Because I'm getting dizzy here. I'm going to call it a night. You guys have a swell evening or day, and I will talk to you on the next episode. Take care.